Boehner. What happened in the 2011 budget deal? Because when it was first announced, we heard it was $60 billion that you had cut. And then that number got reduced to $38 billion. And then by the time it was analyzed even further, it was down to just hundreds of millions and not even billions. What happened on that deal?
Well, that's not really true. The House passed $61 billion worth of cuts. I tried to do everything I could to get that enacted. The president wouldn't agree.
Right.
What we did was we got $38.5 billion worth of cuts that the Congressional Budget Office says will save hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. There's a lot of confusion out there about budget outlays versus expenditures. At the end of the day, it's all cash that was available for the government to spend. And pulling that back was a first step. And the fact is this. We're going to spend $79.5 billion less than what the president wanted to spend this year in that one-third of the budget that we call discretionary spending. And the fact is, we're going to spend $38.5 billion less than we spent last year in that one-third of the budget.
Then why was all the reports that kept reducing the original number?
Because people got into this debate over outlays versus expenditures, and they confuse people. But those are the facts.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me just run through. The CBO had some chilling numbers and conclusions that they came out with, and I just want to read a couple of things that they pointed out. We are headed for the most predictable economic crisis in American history, and Washington is not providing the leadership we need to avoid it. That's a frightening and chilling.
It's a very direct statement.
Yeah.
And coming from a government agency is even more remarkable. But we can't continue to spend money we don't have. We can't borrow 42 cents for every dollar the federal government is going to spend this year. A budget deficit of $1.5 trillion. And according to the president's budget, trillion-dollar deficits for as far as the eye can see. This is not sustainable. It has to be stopped. We took a small step earlier this year. Now it's time for the big step.
Let me just give this, and maybe you can explain this to people in terms, because I think we get into millions and billions and people and trillions and people get confused. The CBO projected the public debt is going to reach 70% of GDP this year. The normal historical average, putting aside World War II, is what, about 18%, 17%, and other years 11%, very, very low. The historical average is about 18-19%. So they predict by 2021, 91% of GDP, and then they predict it going to 101%, and then they predict it going to 200% by 2030. So that means we're going to spend 2 times the amount we take in.
Well, this is not sustainable, and the American people know it. That's why I don't want, and my team doesn't want, this opportunity to escape us. It's time for the president to get serious about cutting spending now and making real changes so that the debt curve out in the future turns down dramatically.
Even Greece, and we see what's going on there, is 150% of GDP. So we're on this trajectory. The Democrats, though, have been using these tactics, predictable fear tactics, meta-scare we call it. You know, how are you going to counter the predictable attacks against conservatives and Republicans by the president, he's already done it, and by the Democratic leadership?
Well, I don't know that we want to outline the steps that we're going to take, but they're going to come. It's pretty clear to me that we're going to see the Treasury Department or the Social Security Department send letters out suggesting that, oh, my goodness, you might not get your Social Security check next month, or we may have to stop payments to Medicare providers unless this debt ceiling is dealt with. It's predictable. It's going to come. What we've got to do is continue to press our case to the American people that cutting spending now and dealing with our long-term debt will help create a better environment for job creators in our country.
Last point on the CBO. They said Medicare is unsustainable. Paul Ryan put forward a plan. Can you explain to people how this won't impact, as the president said, kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome, and the elderly, that they'll have to fend for themselves? What is the plan?
What it does is give every American who's on Medicare the opportunity to choose a health care plan that fits their needs. The guaranteed issue. Nobody's going to be denied. and for most of the population, we will pay the full cost of that premium, if you will. You know, Medicare recipients today pay a small premium every month. They'll continue to pay that. But if you're wealthy and you've got substantial assets beyond your Social Security, we're going to expect you to actually pay the cost of your premium. But it's not going to affect anybody in the middle class or below. It'll actually give you choices of a private sector plan that will actually cover more than what Medicare covers today.
More, in other words, it'll go to the states, and the states will, in other words, that money will be allocated?
It's no. Just like the prescription drug plan that seniors have available to them today. They get to choose whatever kind of plan they want. They pay a portion of that cost. The government pays a portion of that cost. Why shouldn't Medicare have the same kind of opportunity where the private sector would actually offer these plans in a variety of plans to seniors?
What about Social Security? Similarly, it's headed for bankruptcy. Is means testing inevitable? Raising the eligibility age, is that inevitable?
At some point it is. I would hope the president would deal with it. When I said everything's on the table except raising taxes, I meant everything's on the table.
Yeah.
We know we've got long-term problems in Social Security. We know it has to be dealt with. And the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to make the changes necessary to ensure that the program is sustainable and there for those seniors who need it.
Pretty profound, though, when you think about it. We take in $2.2 trillion a year, and we spend $1.65 trillion more than we even took in. It's almost double. We're spending double what we take in.
John, I've been watching leaders for 20 years that I've been in Washington. Every year they look at this problem. And it's like they look up at a mountain, they see how tall it is, and they see how steep it is, and decide, nah, we're going to kick the can down the road another year. Well, guess what? We're out of road to kick the can down. Now is the time to deal with it.
All right, let me ask you just one or two foreign policy questions. The battle, the president, the War Powers Act in Libya, and recently you had a vote in the House saying, you know what, you don't feel that there's a defined mission by the president. Explain why that vote went out that way.
Well, I've never seen an administration act so precipitously when it came to engaging American troops on foreign soil. There was no consultation. There was no discussion, not with members of Congress, not with the American people. Next thing you know, we've got troops flying missions in Libya. And so there's a constitutional battle that's taking place here between the Congress and the president over the fact that there was no consultation, there was no authorization. Secondly, we get into this whole issue of what's the mission? What's our goal here?
He said there were no hostilities.
Yeah, right. Well, nobody bought that nonsense at all. But what's our strategic interest here? You know, the plan is to protect innocent civilians and hope that Colonel Gaddafi goes away. Well, guess what? I asked a question 2 days into this. Mr. President, what if he doesn't go away? I didn't get an answer.
All right, Mr. Speaker, we really appreciate you coming in.
Sean, nice to see you.